Hi everybody. Let's talk and consider a little bit about case 315, which is called the helping hand. In this case that takes place in 1993, we see a US Senator, Harkins, a Democrat from Iowa, and his huge impact on the well-being of children in Bangladesh. What was the link there? What was the connection? If you read the case already, you know that we are focusing on the garment industry in Bangladesh at the 1990s. Bangladesh is a poor country or a country of working people. It is considered part of the geopolitical south of the world, and it is a place of very dense, highly populated cities. It goes along the line with a lot of poverty and work, sweatshop work or factory work that is being done by all parts of the population, including children. And so what happens in this story is that in 1993, Senator Harkins proposed a bill, and that bill was to prohibit buying garments, clothes that are made by child labor. Now, this bill did not have a lot of support in the US Senate, and it wasn't likely to become a law. Still, just that proposal resulted in the government of Bangladesh and the garment industry in Bangladesh reacting severely and within days letting go of 50,000 children. All those children were before employed in the garment industry, but then overnight they just lost their jobs. A lot of people in the United States and the West in general saw that as a very positive development. But this case and the information presented in it ask us to think a little closer. For example, we need to start by thinking about why do so many people in the geopolitical north see child labor as a problem. And one way to do that is also to think about how is child labor seen in the geopolitical south in countries like Bangladesh. If you pause here for a second and just think about those two different points of view, I'm sure you can find many differences. Now, the next question to consider is why did the government of Bangladesh and the garment industry react so strongly just to the possibility of a proposed bill? Right? Remember, there was no traction. This bill was not going to become a law. That was pretty clear. But just that proposal resulted in letting go of 50,000 kids within days. And we need to ask why. I mean, the answer is fairly clear. They were afraid to lose the US market. And both the garment industry in Bangladesh and the Bangladeshi government relies on the income that comes from that industry. So for them, this is a threat to the very survival of their economy, of their well-being. While we in the United States or in other Western countries tend to think that child labor is the real threat here. Now, what happens to those kids that once they are let go? 50,000 kids that until this morning were able to go to work and bring money home now don't have that option. what do? Well, if you think from the point of view of the geopolitical north, you're thinking, well, they'll go to school. They'll do kid stuff. They'll play. Maybe they'll have extracurricular activities. But none of that is true in the reality of poor communities in Bangladesh. There are no schools. There's no mandatory education after 5th grade. And even before that, there might be a school, but that school might be too far to get to. Or there will be no access to food. Or the families will be so poor that they rely on whatever income that comes from the children going to work. And so just laying off those kids means that they end up in the street, means that they will look for other employment options outside of the garment industry. But those employment options might be more dangerous, less regulated, and result in kids' well-being in risk or in higher risk than when they are working in the factories. Now, the garment industry, NGOs, and the Bangladeshi government work on this memorandum of understanding to try and bring some benefits or to find some kind of a solution for this problem. Something that would give the workforce needed to the garment industry, allow the kids to work and the families to feed themselves somewhat, but still think about education and the next generation. However, that memorandum of understanding did not extend to the 50,000 kids that were laid off overnight. Why? Why do you think that was? Most of the answers to that question will be because those kids were out of the system by now. Once they left the factories, there was no way to find them and track them. Again, they're not going to schools, they're not going into a different regulated system. They just disappear to the streets and the slums and the world of unregulated child labor. Now, when Senator Harkins proposed the bill, we may think that he came from the point of view of thinking about the well-being of children in Bangladesh. But the reality was that his main consideration was outsourcing of jobs from the United States was just thinking that by eliminating the cheap workforce of children from countries like Bangladesh, that would keep factory jobs in the United States. So the motivation was not directly, at least not to help kids in Bangladesh, but to help the working population in the United States. And then we need to also think about the impact on the status of children and the families in Bangladesh, right? Because families were relying on children getting up in the morning and going to work and bringing some sort of income home. Now that is gone. Where are the children? Who is taking care of them? What does it mean to the household? How do they make up for the lost income, etc., etc. Now, is the impact the same on girls and boys? Most likely not in a society like the one in Bangladesh. And so that, and again, we are all going back to this. This is just a proposed bill by a US senator, and it had huge impact on communities, families, and children all the way in Bangladesh. Finally, I would like you to think about the question of should we establish global rules about child labor. Given everything that we discussed about in this case and how we see child labor very differently in different countries, should we even have global rules about child labor? And if so, what should those rules be? So, happy reading and happy thinking about this thought-provoking case.